Hey, this is Ian Faison with Vetrepreneur Network. Today I'm here with Mike McNerney, the CEO and founder of Efflux. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're here in beautiful Palo Alto. Want to hear a little bit more about your journey
Sure.
as a vetrepreneur, your background, and all the kind of things that you learned about your entrepreneurial path. So,
Sure.
So what did you do in the military?
So I was an Air Force officer, active duty for 4 years. My AFSC was a munitions officer, which I don't even know if they have that anymore. But I had the command of the bomb dump at Holloman Air Force Base. That was my little empire.
And so you joined back in 2002?
Yeah, that's right. 2002 is when I started active duty. I went through officer training school. I'd already graduated college. I graduated in June 2001. 9/11 happened. I went into the recruiter's office. It took a couple months to get through the system.
Yeah.
So 2002 is when I started active duty.
And so you go into the Air Force as essentially Green Gold. You get out. Why'd you get out? What were you thinking of doing? Did you know what you wanted to do?
So my plan was always, from undergrad, even from high schools, that I knew I wanted to actually go to law school. Like I said, I really joined because of 9/11. It wasn't really a thing that I was going to do for a career anyway. I just felt like compelled to serve my country at this kind of critical time. And so I did that. I did my 4 years. And then when that was up, I just said, okay, well, I'll kind of go back to my original plan, which was to re-enter the civilian world. And for me, that meant going to school and then kind of progressing from there.
So after you got out, you go to law school. First kind of like instincts of like going through the law school, are you the only military guy? Are there gals in your class that were also in the Air Force? How'd that work?
There were a handful of veterans in my class. You're talking 1% maybe, right? Not very many. Oddly enough, I think they were almost all Marines. I don't know how that worked out, but so there were a couple. I became very, very close with these guys, and some of them, they're still some of my closest friends. And we had a nice, tight little knit group, small group that were of veterans that went through as a class. But other than that, it was mostly people that had gone right from undergrad right to law school. So a little bit younger usually. Not that they were any less hardworking or bright, but typically a little bit younger than we were, and a little bit less life experienced. So it was an interesting group for sure.
Did you consider going JD MBA or going MBA route?
Absolutely. I wrestled with this quite a bit. I did end up taking, the GMAT?
Yeah.
I ended up taking the GMAT or whatever it is.
GRE,
GRE, yeah. And I did think about business school very, very carefully. I thought about doing the JD MBA program very, very carefully. In the end, I just decided, I'm going to pick the one thing I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to focus on doing it really well, and that was law school. In fact, I really seriously considered not going back to school at all. I considered staying in the military. I considered going into other facets of the government, but I ended up saying, no, I just want to do this one thing like I originally planned, and I want to do it well. So that was it. I stuck with law school.
What was the first position out of law school?
The first position I had out of law school actually was with the State Department. I graduated in 2009, which was a bad year for the economy, frankly, and a bad year for people graduating from law school. A lot of my friends and colleagues weren't able to get jobs anywhere. I fortunately had this, kind of government job lined up, and so I went pretty much straight into the State Department. And I spent my time divided between two offices. I first worked in something called the Middle East Partnership Initiative, which was focused on the rule of law and economic development and the rights of women and minorities and children and so forth in kind of the broader Middle East and North Africa. So I worked there for a while. And then I transferred over to work for the late Ambassador Richard Holbrooke in Afghanistan, where I focused on anti-corruption, detainee policy, rule of law type stuff again, right? Kind of the guy with the legal background. They keep putting me into these types of roles. So that was my first job out of law school, is really as a State Department kind of quasi-diplomat.
And so did you, are you thinking at this point, things are going pretty well, do I stay with the State Department? What happened next?
Yeah, man, it was interesting. So I actually entered the State Department under a fellowship program called the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. And part of this is you have to rotate around, which is why I spent time in the Middle East Partnership Initiative and then working for Richard Holbrooke. And I had one more tour left. And a friend of mine who I had met and served with when I was a second lieutenant years back, had wound up at the Pentagon working in cyber policy, and said that there was an opening for an attorney to handle the cyber policy kind of portfolio from a legal perspective. And they were looking for a lawyer that had a security background and that wasn't afraid of computers, and that was apparently just me left in the entire universe of lawyers at the time. And so I said, sure, this sounds really interesting, it sounds really challenging. I was more than happy to get away from Afghanistan and the Middle East, and so to kind of go on to this new challenge. So I did it, and that kind of set me on an entirely different path. I really kind of took this cybersecurity discipline, started off in the general counsel's office, and eventually was kind of poached by my client, if you will, and ended up working as a cyber policy advisor directly in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Great experience, spent a couple of years there doing just amazing, working at the highest levels of national security in the government, doing amazing stuff. And it was all thanks to this guy that I served with way back in the day that saw an opening and helped match me with that opening.
And so basically you went into like a JMO program for lawyers.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
and then you link up with a buddy who you were a junior officer with, and then the next thing you know, you're working on cybersecurity policy.
Yeah.
So let's kind of switch gears. So tell me a little bit about your company and then why the heck you started it.
Yeah.
We'll come back to your story.
So I have a very early stage cybersecurity startup company. We're very new. We have 8 people, like starting yesterday, right? 8th person brought on board. So very, very exciting time. My founding team, including myself, are all veterans. Turns out all Air Force veterans, because we kind of all knew each other.
Where'd you meet them?
It's a small Air Force cybersecurity community. So I didn't serve directly with any of them, but we just kind of all knew each other. And I would say that almost everyone in my company is either a veteran or has worked for the government in some way, shape, or form at some point in their life. So there's this really strong kind of service and camaraderie element culturally to our company, which I really, really like. I also like being in the kind of cybersecurity space because it seems like it's impactful, right? I think what we're building can actually make a difference, make people safer, make their data more secure. So it's a really exciting space to be in. Obviously, it's a hot topic, and being able to work with a group of former veterans and national security government people is just really, really terrific.
So how long did you know your co-founders before you started?
I would say, a couple years, but not much more than a couple years. Let's say maybe 2 years at most. I knew one of my co-founders for 2 years and the other one for about a year before I came on board full time. So.
And how long did you start kicking around the ideas of, was it after knowing each other for 6 months, you're like, hey, I have this idea and we should start sitting down and getting on a Google Doc?
So this process was a little bit different. So my other two co-founders had the idea and been tossing it around and kind of started forming the structure of a company for a while. And I've been kind of an advisor to them, checking in, helping them think about operational and business aspects of what they're doing, because they were both deeply technical, which I'm less so. And then after that year, it was kind of ready to become a real company, and they wanted to bring in kind of more of an operational CEO, and that's when they invited me to join the team.
And so they're cutting you checks just every single week before that happened, right?
Yeah, no. This was all free, right? Like I was an advisor, they didn't pay me anything. Like it was helping friends out more than anything, probably at that point.
But it's a really important distinction, because we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs and founders that how they met their founder or their co-founders is they just offered to work on their projects for free for a while, because they're like, hey, I like what you're doing, I think it's really cool, and I want to be able to help in some way. And I think that's very much a militaristic mindset. It's like, if one of your battle buddies or somebody that is working on a project, like, it's kind of the who else needs to know, plus, what are the ways that you need, my help or our support or air support or whatever it is, right?
That, and I think odds are most startups fail, and even the ones that succeed have tremendous ups and downs. And if you're just in it for something material, you're probably not going to stick through the troughs, right? You need people that kind of, especially in the very early stage, the founding team really has to believe in what it's doing and be willing to put blood, sweat, and tears into it for free, for an uncertain outcome, right? And if you don't have that, and this is a great way to test that, is are you willing to help us for free during this critical time? Then you can kind of judge, is there the shared vision, is there the shared passion, is there a cultural fit? All these things that are vitally important to an early stage company, as important as the resources and money and investment and customers itself are those kind of core values.
How important is the mission to you? Like, how do you broadcast it? Is it in your signature block? Like, how do you kind of manage mission attainment versus focus?
Yeah, I would say that it's you need to drive a distinction between the mission and kind of the marketing, right?
Yeah.
Our mission is to make a world-class security product, right? What exactly does that look like is a question of product market fit. What do our customers want? What do our customers want this to be over time, right? We're a vendor, right? We have to be responsive to our customers and what they want. So, we have that kind of more simple mission. What do I broadcast? It's really more a matter of like, how am I positioning, how am I selling, how am I marketing, right? Which is that's a whole different issue.
Well, no, because we see the threads that veteran entrepreneurs or veterans in general very much understand that there is a mission to be, whatever it is. And that is kind of drilled down to the employees. Everyone gets it, they're behind it, they believe in it. There's a sense of like, we're all working towards this common goal, right? And it's very clear within the organization. And then you have the other piece of that, which is, I'm glad you touched on, is the customer development and relationship building. It's like veteran entrepreneurs you see by and large have a very strong commitment to customers. And I think the way that you see customers is the same way that you see, if you're in support in the military, how you see, the main effort, or how you see, your own soldiers or whatever it is. But so how do you kind of see, like, use the military lens to look at like your customers and how to treat them?
Yeah, so let me address the first part of that. Most of my team are coming from the government, the military, the national security community, and are very passionate about building something that we think is right, something that maybe the government wouldn't let them build because it's too bureaucratic or they don't have the same vision. And so having that sense of mission is great, because it's not just a mission that was dropped down on you by some general. It's like we all agree this is our vision for the world, this is what we want to build, and we like doubly dedicate ourselves to that mission as a result, because you have so much ownership in the vision and in the mission, which is terrific. It makes things really, really clear. I think you're right. I think about customers, an analogy might be the kind of support and ops in the military. I think that's a good analogy. I was a ammo guy, which is basically a maintainer, right? I was basically a maintenance guy. And so my customer, my client, or whatever, the people I was supporting were the pilots and the people that were doing flight operations. And so being responsive to their needs so that they can get done what they need to do. I think it is a similar mindset, and there are some kind of lessons to be applied from one to the other for sure. And then even if you are on the ops side, if you're at the pointy end of the spear, you're still serving someone, the American people, for example. We have to think about, what do they need? Am I doing what needs to be done to protect them, and et cetera. So I do think there's some parallels there.
So when you're working with your co-founders and you're kind of developing your MVP and you're working through this, kind of the first question is, did you go through any programs? And the second one is like, where were your knowledge gaps? Like, where were you like, hey, we really suck at blank, or we're just not familiar at all with this? Or you had to say like, hey, we understand kind of like the product and our customers and cybersecurity and where we want to go with this company, but we're really bad. I mean, most people say legal. So
Yeah. Well, so I think that you have the technology, you kind of have the business side, you have the operations and admin side, and then you have kind of the product side. And speaking about ourselves, and I think this is true of different veteran entrepreneurs, we were very strong in the technology. My co-founders and my team, and frankly, they're NSA guys, right? So they know exactly what they're building, right? They're not just talented engineers, but they are domain experts.
Yeah.
There's no one better in the world to build what we're building. The technology is on point. The business side, which is really what I am bringing to the team, because I'm not an engineer, is good, because I'd spent a couple of years, in Silicon Valley advising and consulting and learning the marketplace and meeting potential customers and getting educated on that. We also were accepted to an incubator that was focused on business and growth and sales, and that was really, really helpful.
And you went through that?
Yeah, correct. All of that was really good. I would say the part where we were, and then the admin and ops side, that's easy enough. Like, we're all disciplined. We know how to do operations as former officers, and you can hire law firms and accountants. There's no innovation needed there, right? The one part that was, I would say, the lacking the most is on the product side, right? How do we take this technology that we think is really interesting and make it into something that someone wants to buy? And that's no easy thing, right? Because you can really get lost in building really cool tech. And potential customers will even come to you and say, that's really cool, I'd be happy to test it, because they want to test cool stuff.
Yeah.
But will they ever actually buy it? Making that switch between just a piece of technology and a product that sells, that is ready for an enterprise security company, so that will sell to an enterprise, getting that ready, that is the biggest gap, I think, for us. And I think that'll be the biggest gap for a lot of veteran companies, because people have the leadership. People who have gone to business school have the business acumen. You can hire away the admin side. We know the ops stuff. The tech stuff, you can get smart people. I think the product side is the hardest part, frankly.
It's funny you say that. I was talking to a Vetrepreneur the other day about pricing.
Yeah.
And I was like, and they do consulting. I was like, how much, they're starting a consulting business. So I was like, how much are you going to charge? Like, what do you think is the appropriate price?
Yeah.
And I think that it's something that, as the military, you've never created a price for anything.
That's right.
Like, and you've also never sold a product, but you've sold tons of things. Like,
right.
every veteran, you have to sell all the time, whether it's to get people's time or resources or whatever. But you've never set the price, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that was something that I think is a really good point, and it's something that you've never had experience doing.
That's right.
And I mean, really, no first-time entrepreneur has that experience doing it, but it's a very difficult experience for someone that has not necessarily had that type of interaction.
Yeah, that's right. The military defends democracy and capitalism, doesn't really practice either, right? So I think that's absolutely true. The good news is that I think military people are instilled with two things that will help you get there, and it certainly helped us. The first is, like, you are this aversion to failure, right? Like, if you fail in the military, it's very, very dire consequences, and it happens, but like you know viscerally how terrifying and terrible that is. And so you do everything in your power to make sure that doesn't happen, right? That stubbornness, that drive that you really need to be able to do. And maybe your company will fail, but it's not going to be for lack of like doing everything you possibly can to make sure that doesn't happen. I think that's one essential thing. And the other thing is that you can put together a process for figuring out the answers to these questions. They're not unknowable. I mean, put in a process to go ask some of your earlier friendlier customers, hey, what would you charge for this? Like, what do you think? How should I model this? Like, what is this worth to you? I mean, that's the answer. What you charge what the market will bear, right?
Yeah.
You just go figure out what the market will bear, and that's what you do, right? Yeah. So you just put in a process in place for that, and having the discipline and understanding that you can do that, even if you don't know how to achieve that objective, but you know how to put together the steps to be able to know how to achieve that objective. Military people are exceptional at that, I think.
Yeah, and the testing process and not being afraid of failure is a huge part of that as well. It's
that's right.
You just constantly test how much the market will hold that specific thing.
Right.
And if you set it way too high, you're going to know really quick, and if you set it way too low, you're probably going to know really quick too.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just like in the military, I'm sure everybody's had an experience where their commanding officer has said, or their NCO has said, we need you to achieve this objective. You can't be like, I don't know how to do that, I'm going home. Like you figure it out, right? That's what you have to do, and we just do the same thing here.
Yeah, and it was something that we were talking about, off air, was that, when you need to learn about something, it's like, oh, I'm just going to pound the books for the next 3 months and learn every single thing that there is to know about, whatever, marketing to, marketing through social media channels or whatever it is.
That's right.
Wherever your customers are. So what's one piece of advice that you would say to veteran entrepreneurs looking to get into kind of the tech world specifically, since that's kind of where you live?
For those who aren't technical, I would say find a quality technical co-founder. If you want to found a company, if you want to be a founder of a company, you have to have that. And this is the hardest thing for me to find. It's the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of my co-veterans that are more on the business side or the operations side, is finding that technical co-founder to actually build the thing, right? So that is something that's worth finding. There are a couple ways to do that. You can find that person in school. You can go to a big company and make friends and generate ideas, and then eventually go eject with someone and start something. So I think if you're not technical, finding that technical co-founder, and then if you are, the opposite side of that, finding someone that can help you on the business and operations side. So you want to have those two, that real strong partnership of at least two people. I think that's crucial for the people that are starting that want to start their own thing. Go ahead.
And I guess I should say, like, tech is obviously an enormous thing, and kind of what I mean is like those exponential technologies, those sort of things. And I would say that, to add to your point, it's like you did, volunteer to work on cool problems and projects with people that you are like-minded. And it seems like that's the way that I don't know if you were setting out to start a company, but you kind of ended up there because you were working on cool projects.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I did know at some point when I was at the Pentagon, I said, I think I love government service, but it's never been what I want to do as a career. I just view it as service, like you serve your country and then you go back out to your life, right? And that was my mindset there. And at some point I said, okay, it's time for me to go back to civilian life, back to the private sector. And I knew that I wanted to be a startup CEO. I knew that. But how do you go from military officer, law degree, policy guy to tech founder CEO? That line is not clear.
Right? No, yeah, it's it's like the little graph where it has the scribbles all over. It's like the line to be a startup CEO.
So I came up, just like we were talking about, I came up with a process. I said, number one, I quit and I'm moving to Silicon Valley because that's it. Burn the ships. This is it. This is what I'm doing. And I think at least showing that minimum level of risk acceptance is important to the valley. It's like, okay, safe, bureaucratic government person, how much risk are you willing to accept? This is really risky. So I said, well, I'm quitting everything and I'm moving out here with really no job. I just said, I'm going to make this work. And then I came up with a plan. I'm going to do these things. I analyzed where I needed to be where I was today, what those gaps were, like you said, and then started checking them off. And then eventually it worked out. And I'll say, frankly, everyone that I know that has done something similar, been a veteran, been in government, that has wanted to do the same thing, it's pretty much the process they've gone through, and it's worked every single time. It's just a matter of time.
It's so interesting. So if you look at it, it's involved in the military, which is insanely bureaucratic, State Department, you've checked every single bureaucratic box, and I think a lot of people see that as or a lot of veterans see that as a negative for them. It's like, well, I've only been part of these big organizations, how do I convince people that I'm innovative? Well, it's like you convince them by telling your story. You acknowledge the fact, hey, I know I've been involved in a ton of large organizations. This is how I've been innovative within those.
Yep.
And here are all, like you said, I didn't know about marketing, or I didn't know about, whatever, and I'm going to check all the different blocks. I didn't know about VCs. I didn't know about all of these things. here's how I've, this is my experience, here I've supplanted that with all this information and training and connections, and now I'm, a more well-rounded person.
Yeah, and you can leverage, the veterans, expatriate, whatever you want to call it, community in Silicon Valley, like in my case.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, there are a number of, more successful, more senior, CEOs of publicly traded companies who are veterans that are always willing to talk to another, veteran that's hungry, that's smart, that's trying to do something. I mean, the community it's small, but it's a very good community here, especially. Like, everyone will call you back, everyone will give you advice, and not needing anything in return, just because they want to see another veteran be successful. So if you want to learn about how I should put together a pitch for a venture capitalist, there's someone you can call and be like, here's what you should do. They maybe not do it for you, right? But they're like, here's how you approach this, here's how these people operate, here's how you can think about that. I did that, others have done that. Relying on those trusted advisors and that network has been absolutely invaluable. And the rest of it is it's pretty straightforward. Like, if you have a good idea, and you have a good team, and you can recruit other people because they like you, they like your vision, they like your leadership, and you can get customer traction, like, who can argue with you?
Yeah.
Right? You have a great company, like, that's it. There's no arguing. It will work itself out. So I think veterans are well placed to put all those pieces together.
Well, and it makes me think of the veteran leader office hours, right? It's like most veterans that are high up in companies or whatever, they have 15 minutes of office hours a week that they will let you in the door and talk about stuff. But if you are focused and you have an agenda or thoughts about things, they'll be open to that. And if it's just like, hey, I don't know what I want to do, you still might get the call. But if you have a more focused approach to that, yeah, absolutely, send over the pitch deck and let's talk for 20 minutes.
I would say, I iterated, when I was leaving government, I didn't really know exactly, I knew I wanted to be, a startup CEO, but I didn't really know exactly what that meant. So I actually started off fairly broad. I would call people up and say, look, I'm transitioning, and just leave it very open-ended. Like, what do you think I should do?
Yeah.
And then they give me some options. They say, well, and then I would dive down more deeply, and I'd say, I really want to be a tech CEO. I want to have your career. How can I be in a position that you are today? Like, how can I be that in the future? And then, I would take that information back, think about it, come back out with more refined questions, think about it, come back out. So I just kept iterating on it until I figured out the path that made the most sense to me. So I would say, obviously, if you know what you want and you can be very directed in your questions, that's great. But I wouldn't be too shy about having this, I know generally speaking what I want to do, but I don't have any specifics. I think that's okay. It wouldn't bother me if someone were like, hey, how do I transition from government to civilian life? I'm not going to be we're wasting my time.
Yeah.
I'll still talk to you, right? Everybody's going to talk to you. So I wouldn't be too shy about that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, where can people find you on Twitter or otherwise?
So my Twitter, that's a good question. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that before. My Twitter handle is @Mike C. McNerney, MIKEC McNerney. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn or whatever. Yeah. It's easy enough. So,
sounds good, Mike. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
You can check him out on Mike C. McNerney on Twitter. and yeah, last thing. What's next for the company?
What's next for us is really finishing out we're in the very early stage. That's figuring out our product market fit, really refining that. Hiring a few more really top players, and then a little bit later this year, raising our next round of financing, which is typically at this stage would be called the A round. So that's what's next for us. Big milestones, very important milestones.
So we'll check in and talk funding and all that sort of stuff next time.
Yeah.
After all that goes through, I'm sure it'll be fun. And glad that you got to take some time out. I'm sure your schedule's not that busy, so taking 20 minutes out to talk, we really appreciate it. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, talk soon.
Cool. Thanks, Ian.
Yep.
Bet.